Meow.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the SuperHouse Podcast. This is Andrew, your host, and I'm once again joined by our senior Batman correspondent, Benoit.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And this week we have another Bat installment, this time going in order. We're doing Batman Returns. We're just doing our thoughts and impressions and maybe a little hint here and there at some of the deep dives into the scripts, but that's going to be mainly saved for the sequel to this episode.
Exactly. I think last time we did this just for the 30th anniversary of '89, but afterwards I reached out to Andrew. I was like, what if we just did this with every Batman movie?
Let's
and
keep
just
going.
Made that a series and stuff. We'd be set for episodes for a good period of time. So before we start, I had reviewed the episodes related to the '89 movie and wanted to sort of make a few corrections on some of the things that I said. As you guys can imagine, sometimes some of the stuff comes from my head, but also some of it comes off the cuff, and I have to sort of recheck some of the things that, some of the facts I was spewing out. So one of the things that I said that Sam Hamm was the one who came up with the idea that Bruce Wayne traveled around the world to train to be Batman. That's kind of correct, but it was actually around the same time. Another comic book writer, Christopher Priest, aka James Owsley, not the same Christopher Priest who wrote Prestige, revealed the similar thing in Batman number 431. Which starts out, if this sounds familiar, with a young Bruce Wayne trekking up a snowy mountain to find the monastery up at the top. So
With a blue flower?
the blue flower part was all Nolan and
Okay.
Goyer, but the imagery of that comes from that comic, and that was around the same time as Hamm's Blind Justice, and that was all in 1989. So kind of funny enough, the stuff about Bruce Wayne training around the world to train how to fight crime was basically a new part of the comics around the same time as the '89 movie.
Okay.
So that's interesting. A little small correction too. I said in my fan cast Brian Cox would be the Tom Mankiewicz Penguin. However, I forgot my number one choice from the past, which was Bob Hoskins.
Okay.
I'm like, why did I not do Bob Hoskins? I mean, Cox would still be a good Penguin, but Bob Hoskins to me was like my number one choice for many years, and I just forgot that he was still, he was acting at the time, so he would have been great. I said the Julie Hickson Tim Burton treatment was 80 pages. I rechecked; it was actually 43. So I don't know where I got the number 80 from, but
that's more of a treatment at that point.
That is
not a script.
It was definitely a treatment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said Nicole Kidman wasn't really in movies in '87. Truth is, she was, but she wasn't really in anything big enough to realistically be considered for a Hollywood blockbuster movie. I said Sean Young got injured shooting the horse scene for Batman '89. That's technically not true. She was actually not shooting anything. She was practicing for it on her own. She was practicing horse riding for the movie when she fell off. She didn't shoot a scene. So she was there during pre-production. She actually was there for a read-through of the script.
Okay.
And she was a week away from shooting when that injury happened. So I wanted to correct that. One thing I also wanted to clarify, I said Kiefer Sutherland was offered Robin before Lost Boys. Lost Boys was 87. And obviously the movie was 89. However, Kiefer said he was offered it when he was around 19, which places it around 1985, 1986. So he would have been offered right around the time Hamm turned in his first draft.
Okay.
Or so. So technically it was still before Lost Boys, even though Lost Boys came out before Batman '89. Funny enough, directed by Joel Schumacher. The site with the photos of the Gotham City set, I said it was called 1989 Batman Movie. It's actually called 1989batman.com. For anybody who was wondering why they couldn't find that. I said it was Tim Burton and John Peters who went to see Phantom of the Opera. It was actually John Peters and Jack Nicholson.
Okay.
Who were the ones who came up with that. And lastly, I had forgotten who was the co-writer on Batman Dark Knight, which was that sort of sequel script that never got made that was going to have Clooney as Batman. It was Stephen Wise, not Bill Wise.
Okay.
And that ends my correction stuff. So now on to Batman Returns.
The corrections department.
That's
good, though. That's good.
My own thing. Well, because I've been in the shoes of listening to a podcast and I hear like little things. I'm like, no, that's not true. And so like, I at least want to be able to correct that for the me's out there who are listening into this. So let's dive in. For me, Batman Returns is kind of a weird thing because I said '89 was the movie of my childhood. It helped make me become a Batman fan. However, I didn't really grow up with Batman Returns as a little kid. I was mainly on VHS with Batman 89 and Batman Forever. How about you?
Well, so this is the first one I believe I saw in the theater, and I was quite young, but it was like 92, right?
Yeah.
So that was in second grade, which was a good time to see it. Although there's a lot of adult shit in this movie, but we'll get into that in a minute. So this was a big one for me, and I think I even read the novelization
really
for this as a second grader. Like, I think I remember reading it from cover to cover. I don't know if I skipped parts. I can't remember exactly, but like, in some ways, this was like bigger for me. But I think that when it comes down to ultimate, what do you call it? Like amount of VHS plays, 89's still the king. But this one was still sort of a big deal for me. So, yeah. So yeah.
I mean, I didn't get the VHS until maybe, I don't know, 10 or 11 or so.
Okay.
Because at that point, I wanted it to be complete.
Yeah.
And plus, it was just like I had only one movie with Michael Keaton as Batman and the Danny Elfman theme, and I wanted the other one.
It's a natural evolution there.
It was, but what it sort of became was, if Batman 89 was the movie of my childhood, Batman Returns was the movie of my adolescence, which kind of makes sense because it's a little bit more grown up. It sort of fits in with somebody who is, getting their hormones and stuff like that. But it was also
around when you were 13 and shit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Pfeiffer was important, very important for you.
To be honest though, it wasn't even really Pfeiffer. I wasn't like, a lot of people talk about how Julie Newmar, that was how they first discovered that discovered everything down there. It gets hard, but it wasn't really that. And even today, like, she's amazing in this role. I don't know. There's not really something about her that is like, oh my God, attracted to her, like fantasizing her about it. It was more of the fact that when I was in my adolescence, about 12 to 15, that's when you get like all girl crazy and stuff.
Yeah.
And most people sort of get their like first boyfriends, first girlfriends, things like that. I didn't have that. Yeah. So the sort of feeling of loneliness sort of kicked in, and the one movie that ended with the hero not getting the girl was Batman Returns, which made Batman the only hero I could really relate to, which I think psychologically
in
plays
a sad way.
Which psychologically is why I'm the senior Batman correspondent. I don't think I realized that until recently. But I mean, because obviously I was into Batman beforehand, but I don't think it was never to the point where I don't think I would have necessarily grown up to be the person who would try to read all the comics and read all the unmade scripts of this and things like that, unless there was a more deeper connection to it. But like, I'd grown up with James Bond, with Star Wars, with Disney movies, and like, this is the only one where I'm just like, okay, I can relate to this ending,
right?
That we'll go into in a little bit. But I would wake up in the mornings, and sometimes I wouldn't even rewatch the movie. I would get up super early in the morning, go to this other room where we had a TV where we can just watch the VHS. I would turn the sound down so that my parents wouldn't know that I was rewatching it, and I would just fast forward to the end, and I'd rewatch the ending, or I'd listen to the end credits, because this was before I got a hold of the soundtrack, so the only way I could listen to the Danny Elfman music was literally just fast forwarding all the way to the goddamn end.
Okay.
To listen to the music, and it's beautiful, and I honestly prefer it even more to the 89 soundtrack, just because it's a beautiful set of themes.
It's a little more fleshed out in some ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I even at one point I was part of a middle school play that was like a murder mystery theme. I wasn't an actor in it. I volunteered to play the music, and the music I played was me using my ear to play the Penguin and Catwoman music from Batman Returns. I don't think anybody knew that at the time, but it's not like this shit was copyrighted. Like, we were just a local middle school play performing in front of the parents, so we weren't making any money off of anything.
I think it's fine. Yeah.
So that was Batman Returns for me growing up, and I always knew it was a little different from the other one, but I didn't mind that. And I think I had a personal connection to it, and maybe it was more of a personal connection to this one than the 89 movie in retrospect, but that's how it was like for me. How was it like now, I guess, because you hadn't seen the movie. I'd seen this movie in Christmas, so this was relatively fresh in my mind. How was it for you? Because I know you said it's been a while now that we've rewatched this.
I haven't watched this since. God, we might have watched it at SuperHouse, the actual SuperHouse in college.
Totally.
Maybe. And I was drunk as hell probably because it was college. Other than that, that's like one time. And then before that, it was when I was a kid. So it had been quite some time. And throughout this whole, by the way, just like last time, we just watched this to get it fresh in our minds for the listener before we watched it, before we recorded, before we're recording now. So we've just ended watching Batman Returns now, and the whole time we were watching it, I was just saying, I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Yeah,
I do remember this,
which was great though, because like obviously I remember it. I've seen it over and over, but to see it with somebody who was like rediscovering it is always a treat for me.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how, like we said before, you said before that you get to see Burton really have control when he can really take the reins. You basically, this is what you get. You get Batman Returns. So, like, it seems like no one said no to anything he wanted.
It does feel like when a director does a Batman movie, it's his second one that is like a little bit more his own signature, or a little bit more.
You have the power.
Yeah. So Batman Returns is a little more Burtonish. Batman and Robin is more Schumacher Unchained.
Right.
Dark Knight is more Nolan Unchained. Batman vs Superman is more Snyder Unchained. Like each one and each incarnation, it feels like the first version is kind of a little bit more studio approved. Second one is a little bit more like, oh, like you did well this first time. We'll give you a little bit more free reign here.
Right.
Because as I was pointing out as we were watching it, I'm just like, everything about it, it almost feels like it's a different type of continuity, because there's a different mayor, there's a different Gotham City. It's not the Pinewood set.
Right.
They tore down the Pinewood set, unfortunately. Anton Furst wasn't involved in this. He had committed suicide, sadly, in 1991 for hopefully unrelated reasons. And Bo Welch did this one. Everything's shot more on the Burbank Warner Brothers lot, I think. I might have to fact check that later. But everything's
probably LA somewhere,
somewhere in LA, and everything. And there's a different feeling to it, and all that. And it's almost its own continuity, but it's a little bit more. I think it's a product that Burton, I think, was happier with, and you can tell because it's a lot weirder. There's a more of a supernatural element to both Penguin and Catwoman that you didn't really get with. I mean, the most that you got with Joker was the fact that he survived the chemical bath. But this one, you flat out have like a mutant penguin and a woman who's been seems like resurrected by cats. It's a little ambiguous whether or not that's really what it is. We can go into that a little bit. But
when I was a kid, I really thought that somehow the cat's licking her and her blood, like if a cat's tongue touched an open wound, that made you crazy or something. Like that was what I gathered from it when I was a kid.
Right. I mean, I think as I was telling you, the Halle Berry movie made it so that it was literally like this cat that goes around and breathes life back into women who have been wronged and things like that, and tried to make some explanation for it, and has a picture of Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman in one scene, so it's technically could be considered to be in continuity, but like it's kind of ambiguous about whether they played a role, or if it's just a case where the awnings broke or fall and she just survived, and the cat's licking her just made her wake up. Maybe it was the fall more than the cats sort of thing that made her that way.
Well, there's that joke from Shrek is like, I didn't know she had a brain damage.
Right.
So they're sort of saying like she got some brain damage, which I think it's kind of all ambiguous, and Burton's just playing around with all of that.
Yeah. What we could do is we could just jump into. I mean, really, there are three villains in this movie.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So starting with the one who's not from the comics, who's Max Schreck.
Okay.
He's kind of forgotten in a way. Everyone's like, oh,
Yeah.
Catwoman and Penguin, but Shrek is kind of the most evil character in this whole
He
thing.
really is. Yeah. So watching this as an adult, that's
Yeah.
really. I didn't really pick up on that when I was a kid, but watching it now,
Right.
like he is the true monster of this
Mhm.
whole thing.
So let's see. I have a few things on him. Max Schreck. This is kind of common IMDb trivia knowledge, but Max Schreck is named after the first actor to play Dracula.
Oh yeah.
From Nosferatu and stuff. And so he's kind of got a vampire type nature to him. He wants a power plant that sucks the power type of thing out of it. So, Burton's very influenced by German expressionist films here. So
Yes.
Nosferatu is tied to Max Schreck. A penguin's outfit looks like it's out of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that type of stuff. So Shrek also, weirdly enough, not to make this political, but he's a businessman with a New York accent with really weird hair, with his last name on every fucking thing. Like, it does seem like he is a 1990s Trump parable in this.
Yeah.
Even Chip Shrek looks like Eric Trump today. Weirdly, I don't think they would have predicted that type of thing. One thing I want to clarify, and we're going to go into this a little bit more when we do the episode on the development, but a lot of people are saying that in the original scripts, Max Schreck was Harvey Dent.
Right.
And that Catwoman sort of electrocuting him at the end would have caused him to be scarred.
Wow.
Now, while that seems like a cool idea, if you think about it, that means that Harvey Dent would have been a monster the whole movie.
Right.
And worse than the other two. And also, it's complete bullshit because I can't find any evidence that that was actually true.
Okay.
Max Schreck was Max Schreck since Daniel Waters, the screenwriter, wrote the first draft and even talked about it. And we'll just save it for the next episode. But even talked about having Harvey Dent have a cameo in that. So if Dent was going to have a cameo while Schreck was still around, there was no possible way they would have been the same guy.
Okay.
In this. So even though it's kind of a cool idea when you first hear about it, it's not actually true. And I'm just tired of hearing people say that was true because
they want it to be true so bad.
They kind of want it because he's not somebody in the comics. So to hear that this guy who wasn't in the comics was originally going to be a comic character, is kind of, it's intriguing for the comic book fan. For me, as I was telling Andrew, Shrek is more of a Rupert Thorne character than Carl Grissom was in '89.
What was the what do you call it? Like the aversion to using an actual name, Rupert Thorne? Like, 'cause this happened twice now.
Well, with Grissom, I don't know where it came from. Maybe just Sam Hamm wasn't super familiar with the Englehart run compared to the producer. For this one, the sort of parallels between him and Thorne feel almost more coincidental. I haven't heard anything that feels like it's deliberate parallel. Okay. However, Rupert Thorne in the comics is introduced trying to get a power plant together.
Okay.
He has this whole mane of white silvery hair.
Right.
He kills Hugo Strange, who comes back to haunt him, sort of thing, kind of like how Shrek, quote unquote, kills Selena and who comes back as Catwoman. He also, in the Jerry Conway run, came back and put in his own candidate to be the mayor.
Okay.
Who plotted with that mayor to frame Batman for a crime.
Okay.
So, like, almost everything Shrek does in this movie has been done by Rupert Thorne in the comics.
It's just like you got it all there.
Yeah.
Like, keep them exactly the same. Just change the name, and then you got comic book fans loving even more. It's just weird to me.
It's even like with Grissom in the '89 movie is just like he's a mob boss. Everyone knows he's a mob boss.
Yeah.
But in the comics, Rupert Thorne was part of it was kind of like what I talked about in the Mankiewicz script. He was a well-known public figure.
Okay.
Whose sort of criminal activities were in the shadows and Batman knew about it.
Okay.
So it's a lot more similar to Max Schreck than it is to Carl Grissom. So, I mean, I haven't heard Englehart talk about Max Schreck maybe he just didn't like the movie and doesn't want to claim credit for it. But to me, Max Schreck is more Rupert Thorne than Harvey Dent or anyone else. So I'd say if there was ever a more comic booky parable, it would be to Thorne to Shrek than Harvey Dent or anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's see. In a way, the whole legitimate businessman actually being a villain is kind of foreshadowing of what would happen to Penguin in the comics. Funny enough.
Okay.
With the whole Iceberg Lounge thing and everything. So that sort of brings me to Penguin in this because I think DeVito's performance, honestly, is underrated. We remember Nicholson as Joker. We talk about Pfeiffer a lot as Catwoman, deservedly so. We'll go into that. But DeVito really gives it his all in this. He went into the makeup and prosthetics.
Yeah.
Puts on that voice. You can tell he's got the walk and the waddle. I mean, he loved doing this, and you could tell he's having a shit ton of fun.
The lines that he has given to it's just those kind of lines that where he can just chew this fucking scenery.
Yeah,
you know, just really lean into it, and he does such a great job. And like, I was kind of freaked out by him, you know, rightfully so, I guess, as a kid. But to see this as an adult, I could see the performance a lot better.
Yeah.
Now, and yeah, he's really good in this movie, and I agree, he's underrated.
I also think the Penguin characterization kind of gets a bad rap because everyone's so used to the businessman type version from the Iceberg Lounge. But if you look back at some of the older comics, like the idea of Penguin using birds, even like penguins with missiles strapped on their backs, or having some sort of supernatural element to them, there's a still tie to that in the comics. There's versions where Penguin can be able to survive sub-zero temperature, where Batman can't, sort of thing. It's not really said that he's a mutant or anything like that. He's not as disfigured in the comics as he is in this movie.
Yeah.
But it's not that far removed. It's not that much of a reinvention that people say. It's more of an exaggeration. I think when we talked about Penguin in that one episode when we were speculating about Penguin being in the Matt Reeves version.
Oh yeah.
And it was I kind of brought up how or maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but one of the core aspects was that he's somebody who kind of wants to be accepted into society, someone who's always been an outcast. Every single version of the Penguin origin has had to deal with some sort of bullying because of his appearance or being called names, being called Penguin.
That whole thing, like, you dress up as a freak, but I really am a freak. That's a really good line near the end of the movie where I think is definitely inspired by those core concepts of the character. And it really, like, it's kind of strikes a chord with you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he is. It's almost the first. I might be wrong on this, but if I look back, this might be the first time we got a sympathetic comic book villain. Because Joker wasn't really, Lex Luthor, not really. There weren't a lot of superhero movies at the time.
Gene Hackman.
Yeah, the Gene Hackman. Like there was nothing. You didn't really get much into his motivations. Right. This one is like, I was dumped as a baby. I was abandoned.
Right.
And some part of you almost feels like if Shrek didn't. It's a little ambiguous about whether or not if Shrek didn't propose the mayor thing. And with the idea of him having the Red Triangle Circus gang loot around town, would Penguin have just sort of lived as an ordinary citizen who was just more respected by people just because he set up the whole, like, not saying that he would have been a good guy because he still set that up and he was still capable of murder and everything like that. But there's always been certain storylines where Penguin is all up into crime and everything until he falls in love or until he feels love and then he stops. Sort of thing, and I feel like there's a little bit of an element of that in this. It's small, and he's still, you know, even though he's sympathetic, he's still pretty much a monster, and he's a complete pervert and everything. He's groping women all over the place, and this is not. Dude,
let's talk about that for just a quick second before we move on to Catwoman, especially.
Yeah.
This is a factor of the film that I didn't remember at all.
Yep.
Because I was young, I guess. But the Penguin in this is a total fucking perv.
Yep.
There's a lot of lines. It's a big part of his motivations for doing things.
Unlimited poontang.
Yeah, unlimited poontang is a fucking line from Max Shrek to Penguin in this movie.
To motivate him.
Which, look, it's a very believable motivator. So that's cool. But God, I just forgot about this entirely.
Yep.
Entirely.
So he is pretty much, he's like the visual version of the sort of beastly side of like guys of the manosphere, sort of like, you know, just out to get laid and everything.
Right.
And has this ugly, like, you can see it from the scene where Catwoman rejects him and he just automatically is just like, I'm going to kill you now. Instead, just like, you know, just like on online dating where like, girl says, sorry, I'm not interested, or texts you, I'm not interested. And suddenly the guy's like, you fucking bitch, you fat fuck. Like, you know, like that's not fucking, that's not how you're supposed to do it.
Penguin's
but, like,
an incel.
Penguin's an incel. So that's how it is. Batman's the Chad. So
Batman's a Chad. Oh my god. Catwoman's a Stacy.
With this, there's elements of it that I think get overlooked because people are like, oh, like Penguin shouldn't be this disfigured. I'm like, really? Like in the comics, like he's still supposed to look out there. He's supposed to have the big nose and be fat and everything. And
I mean, when you mix up like Burgess Meredith's Penguin
Mhm.
with Burton's style, to me, maybe it's because I grew up with it, but it's just like this is a natural evolution of events. I
Right.
think.
Yeah. So to me, I feel like the mutated penguin is as much of a reinvention that still kind of stays true to stuff
Yeah.
as the Heath Ledger Joker was, where in both cases, both guys were more sort of disfigured or uglier than what they were portrayed in the comics, yet you still sort of stayed true to the core of it, even if the appearance wasn't the same. As a pure comic purist, obviously I prefer the more comic book look, but for what this was, and only Tim Burton could bring this type of version to life, so I don't really mind it.
The blood on his teeth and the black shit coming out of his teeth
bile,
and all
yeah.
that. The bile, like that was like. Honestly, I think that's one of the coolest parts about him. The whole Penguin's mouth, I guess, in this movie, man, it was just really done well. It's horrifying and it makes him more like monstrous.
Yeah.
And another thing. Cool, like character thing that I could notice now that I'm a grown ass man. Penguin's lines to me are this kind of combination of he'll say something kind of graceful and kind of beautiful, but then it's followed up by something sleazy as hell.
Yeah.
It's this combination of those elements. What does he say? Something like crud from the sewer or something. But before that line, he had kind of like more, maybe not beautiful, but like a little bit nicer dialogue.
It is an interesting mix because the Penguin in the comics is very much like he quotes Shakespeare and Keats all the time and things like that. And I think this reinvention sort of made it where he would go back and forth. He goes between, trying to be someone who sounds like he's well respected and rich and everything like that, and true to his biological roots, yet also still very much the monster who was found in the sewer type of thing.
Yeah.
There is sort of, everyone's kind of like, this is ridiculous. He was raised by penguins in the sewer. That's not fucking realistic.
How does he learn to write and read and all this shit?
Well, here's the thing that everybody misses is that, yes, penguins, the baby carriage does get to penguins at the end of that sequence. I can't deny that. However, like there is that Batcave sequence where Bruce Wayne is reading the Red Triangle Circus's history and mentions that one of them was an aquatic bird boy.
Oh, right.
And that one of the members, who was presumably that aquatic bird boy, fled before the police could question him.
Okay.
So to me, that means Penguin wasn't raised by the penguins. He was raised by that circus.
Right.
Which makes a lot more sense.
Right.
If anything, maybe that sequence should have ended with the circus finding him or something like that. That probably would have made more sense. But
yeah, some clowns discover him in like a Moses in the manger, like deranged Moses.
It is a deranged because remember, he also wants to kill the firstborn sons.
Yeah, a lot of biblical stuff going on here. Right?
And it's I was always fascinated by the references in this movie, like what other subtext and stuff, and I did a deep dive into all that, where he's the twisted Moses who, instead of going, being saved and everything and being found by the Egyptian palace, he's being found, in the sewer
by penguins.
And he almost becomes the plague at the end. There's even a shot of some say it's Tim Burton in it. I've never verified it, but before you see Selena in the ballroom, you see a guy with a skull mask dressed like the Mask of the Red Death from the Edgar Allan Poe story, and that is about somebody who shows up at a party to foreshadow the plague coming.
Oh, wow.
And of course, one of the plagues, biblically, I think, was the death of all of the firstborn sons.
Yeah, that actually wasn't a plague. this is the Southern in me coming out now,
Okay,
knowing the Bible.
You know it better than me, so I don't remember. It was one of the things.
You're in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
What happens is there's plagues, but then there's this final thing.
Yeah.
Where literally, as far as I remember, the Holy Ghost himself or itself goes and kills the firstborn.
Yeah, there's something going on. Yeah. But the idea of that, and that wasn't even in the original version. Wesley Strick, who was he's the uncredited writer on this, was the one who came up with that. And it sort of adds a sort of sinister undercurrent to it when you rewatch it, because you see in the beginning, he goes to the Hall of Records to find out like who his parents are. And Batman's like, I think he already knows who his parents are. And so why is he still at the Hall of Records? Because he's jotting down the names of all the firstborn sons. And then later on, you know, when Shrek is like, hey, like, let's be mayor, there's a moment where Penguin's like, well, wait a minute, I've got other things to do, and because he still wants to keep going with that. That's presumably the plan until Shrek promises unlimited poontang, but that's a whole other issue. And then, you know, Catwoman sort of takes a peek, like it's thrown throughout the movie, and Catwoman takes a look and she's like, you already have a list of enemies, and he's like, that list is not meant to be like looked at. So like, it's like, was that always his plan? Was that his MO? Was that something that he did at the circus? Because remember, there's that newspaper article about the circus that I think talks about the kids being kidnapped too. So it could just be his MO that's darkly like, I'm killing all the firstborn sons of everything because, you know, I didn't get a good chance to live, so neither should anyone else.
He wants to end the aristocracy in Gotham, essentially, right?
Right, yeah.
He wants all these fucking rich fucks to die. That's essentially what it is.
Which is an interesting MO for this character that I don't think has ever really been done in other versions, at least, in terms of ending the aristocracy. Usually most versions of the Penguin want to become the aristocracy and always finding himself short because he's a criminal or because nobody accepts him for what he looks like. But this one, I think he's like, he always varies in between on the edge where just like, you know, maybe he wants to do that.
Right.
But like deep down, what he really wants is to be accepted. So whenever he feels loved and accepted, that's really why he wants to be the mayor. Not because he really gives a shit about running Gotham. I think it's more just because he likes being respected and likes being loved after being called, you know, a freak or being treated like a freak for his whole life. And that creates an interesting sympathetic dimension that's, I think, more interesting than just him being some fat dude who can control birds for his crimes and steal stuff, you know,
with interesting umbrellas.
Yes,
parasols.
Yeah. So that's I think this Penguin is underrated, and you know, if Penguin is in the Matt Reeves version, I'm pretty sure he'll be a different take, but he'll have big shoes to fill with Danny DeVito, just like I imagine, you know, Anne Hathaway felt in filling Michelle Pfeiffer's shoes for Catwoman.
It's going to be interesting. And also, I mean, he's got the Robin Lord Taylor version, which is like that guy put his stamp on the character too, you know?
Yeah, my issues with that one, though, is that like the umbrellas never really became a gadget thing.
But as far as a performance and like being sympathetic and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you could tell that love was also another aspect to that version of the character where he wanted to feel that. He even, you know, thought he was in love with Riddler at one point. Like it's all very much based around.
Is he like bisexual in Gotham?
He might be. It's never really said of whether or not he's interested in any girls, so he might actually just be homosexual.
Like that's how the Penguin is thought of today.
Well, I don't know if he is today.
Not DeVito.
That's no. DeVito is very much. He's very much the incel trying to go after girls and stuff. But like Robin Lord Taylor is, you know, is gay himself, and it probably was some, and so was the I believe the actor playing Riddler in Gotham is also gay. So I think that was sort of an element that they thought would be unique to their version.
Why not, man? Put your stamp on it.
That was their stamp. There's a beautiful scene in the final season where Riddler decides, you know, I'm going to put my stamp on the city, and Penguin's like, I'm also going to put my stamp on the city, and they're like, you know, shall we shake on it? And when both of them have knives hiding behind their backs, and they go to hug each other to make this agreement, and they both raise up their hands about to stab each other, but they stop. And it's almost like this feeling of trust that like, okay, he's not trying to kill me. Maybe I shouldn't try to kill him sort of feeling. Yeah. And they break, and then they're like, shall we begin? And that's what causes this. So that's a beautiful scene. And somebody, I loved it. I have this as one of my favorites. I love it when they do this. Somebody actually put the Batman Returns music over it.
Oh shit!
And it's even more beautiful. But
that's
anyway,
awesome.
I'm on a tangent. But
love the tangent.
The Gotham Penguin is very much based around trying to feel loved and stuff. That's why, like, you know, when his mother gets killed in the second season, he goes on a rampage. His father, who's also played by Paul Rubens, when his father dies, in the season afterwards, he goes on another. Like he almost goes on the straight and narrow, and is willing to go on the straight and narrow once he feels loved and respected. But once that is taken away from him, he can turn into a complete monster. So I like that idea. I would like it to be paired up with more traditional elements, though. So, like, as I said, like, the umbrellas never really went anywhere. There was no gadget umbrellas. There was also, weirdly enough, even though he was called the Penguin, there was no bird theme. There was no, he didn't do anything with birds or anything like that.
So it's in that one, it's like a Dick Tracy, but even less so. Like, it's just like a crime boss alias, really. It doesn't, because he has the waddle, right?
Yeah,
that's it.
Hey everybody, it's Andrew. I just wanted to tell you about our friend Israel's retro gaming shop, RetroCo. If you go to retro-ko.com, you'll be able to see all of his retro gaming goodies. If you wanted to get that Sega Saturn hidden gem from back in the day, or if you wanted to get the Famicom disk system that you never got as a kid, or any other type of retro game that you were into, or import game, please go to retroco.com. That's retro-ko.com. And if you use the SuperHouse code Johnson's Ballsack, you'll be able to get a little bit of a discount at checkout. So please, once again, if you could just go to retroco.com. You can also go to facebook.com/retroco with no hyphen. That's RETROKO. You'll be able to find him on Facebook as well. If you were looking for that PlayStation import game that you never got, if you were looking for that Mega Drive game that you never got, or any other kind of retro game, any import game, it could even be European, Israel also curates bundles at RetroCo, and he'll curate that bundle just for you. So please, go check him out. If you put in the code Johnson's Ballsack at checkout, you'll receive a SuperHouse discount.
So it's kind of like that. And also, you know, people tell me you look just like a penguin, but the problem is I'm just like, well, he's a little thin to be called that, but like, I get
penguin.
it. Yeah. But I wouldn't necessarily mind it if they do a thin penguin for the Matt Reeves movie, but I also, you know, think that they can go traditional and, you know, have their cake and eat it too type of thing, where they can put their own stamp on the character while dealing with the traditional elements of it. So, shall we go into Catwoman?
Let's do it.
The MVP of this movie.
Yeah, the MVP.
So, as I said earlier to Andrew, I was like, you know, a lot of people, when they talk about Joker, at least before Heath Ledger, they're just like, oh, like, how are you going to beat Nicholson? I'm like, well, they should have been worried about Pfeiffer. How do you beat Michelle Pfeiffer? Because she's amazing in this movie. She probably has the best, you know, pre-Ledger Batman villain performance. In all honesty, she puts everything into this. Just the way she plays Selina, to Selina after the accident, to being in the costume, the way she changes her voice, the body language, and everything. All the weird sacrifices that she made. I was telling Andrew, she actually did put that bird into her mouth.
Yeah, that's
during
incredible.
The movie.
Incredible.
She did take whip classes and was the one who took off the heads in that store scene. Also, shout out to Kathy Long, who was her trainer in the kickboxing as well as her stunt double. Kathy Long is trained in Kung Fu Sansu, which is the style that I'm being trained in.
Nice.
For unrelated reasons. I didn't realize there was that connection until much later, but
that's cool.
It's sort of
a type of Kung Fu.
It is a type that I feel like is more practical than regular Kung Fu that deals with, you know, more self-defense type stuff. But I imagine Kathy Long's been trained in a whole bunch of different styles, so she I don't know if she taught her Sansu so much, because Sansu is less of a showy thing that you can use in movies, right? As more of a practical, like, how can I cause as much pain as possible type of thing.
Right,
it's not something you'd really be doing on a movie set to another person. Some interesting trivia I think you'd probably like to know. I mean, you already knew this, but because I said this in the last episode, but Annette Bening was the original choice for Catwoman until she got pregnant.
That was the biggest shock, I think, to me in the last episode that we did.
Right. Well, I'm going to shock you even more because Pfeiffer this was not her first time being up for a role as Batman's love interest. When Sean Young fell off the horse and everything, Michelle Pfeiffer's name was batted around, and the person who was against it at the time was Michael Keaton, because that was his ex-girlfriend.
Oh, Pfeiffer was
his ex-girlfriend.
Holy shit!
Yeah. I read about this before we recorded that episode, but I wasn't sure about the validity of it until Robert Wool, who played Alexander Knox, recently said that was true, that was the case. And
holy shit!
So Pfeiffer seemed like she was already in the back of Burton's head or somebody's head who was working behind the scenes, as like she'd be good to put into a Batman movie, and was originally up for Vicky Vale to replace Sean Young until they settled on Kim Basinger, because Basinger was basically among one of the actresses who was, you know, a leading lady who could fly over to London at a minute's notice,
right?
For that, and you know, she did well with that. But Pfeiffer, you know, blows everyone else out of the water when it comes to performances in this. And I'm guessing that whatever happened between her and Keaton, you know, with time passed, he was a little bit more okay with it for this one,
right?
You can kind of feel the sort of awkward yet smoldering chemistry with them. That's partially performance, but also I think part of it's real life. So
they're probably bringing some of that to the table.
Yeah. So it is cool to see, but she's amazing in this role.
Yes.
Funny enough, that last shot with her in the movie was a last minute addition. There was not supposed to be a last shot of Catwoman. She was supposed to be said to be dead. But last minute, they said we should make sure she should show up to be alive. Pfeiffer wasn't available, so that's actually not Michelle Pfeiffer looking up at the bat signal.
What, really?
Nope, that's not Michelle Pfeiffer. It might actually be Kathy Long. I'll have to take a look. But it's someone else standing in for her, because they wanted to say that she was alive because they wanted to give her own spin-off.
Yeah, I mean,
getting her own spin-off movie that would have been directed by Tim Burton and written by Daniel Waters, who wrote this version of her.
Was Burton on for that? He really was. He was into it.
He wanted to do it, and Pfeiffer wanted to play it, and there was a script that was written that we'll cover in a future episode. Hints. That was originally that was going to be how they followed up Batman Returns, and it just fell into development hell for years until they kept rewriting it, and then it turned into the Halle Berry Catwoman movie, where it kind of pretty much got bastardized.
Degradation. Yeah. Degradation.
So in the future episode, I'll be covering the original version of what that Catwoman version would have been, and it's kind of the closest we would have seen to a Tim Burton follow-up to this movie.
Right.
You know, because this is the last time that he touched Batman.
Which, looking back, is kind of crazy because, I mean, do you have any numbers on the box office? This was still a hit, right?
It was still a hit, but I don't think it was a 89 hit. I think the thing is, I don't think it was because of the box office. It was more that
the toys, right?
It was because of toys, because, you know, this is the not so common secret in Hollywood that, like, the money doesn't really come from the box office. It comes from all the toys and the merchandising,
especially with superhero shit. Yeah. The profit margin on painted plastic figures is humongous.
So when you take your kids to a movie and Penguin's out to get unlimited poontang and is spitting out black bile out of his mouth. And
I had several Batman Returns toys. I don't think I had the Penguin, but I had the penguins. I had Battle Penguins, I remember.
As I was telling Andrew, I'm pretty sure my Penguin from McDonald's was not the Danny DeVito Penguin. I think they sold the traditional comic book version to try to distance themselves after they saw this movie, and they're like, holy shit, this is what?
So, yeah, this was Burton with his power. But the thing is, though, playing the long game, even though maybe it made less money, Burton made 2 solid Batman installments. Looking back, like, he fucking did it up. This is, to his credit, this is some good shit, man.
Yeah.
You know, there's not much you can say bad about this movie, in my opinion.
No, I mean, a lot of people can be like, "Oh, it's cheesy. Look at all the penguins and everything," and okay, but I'm just like,
that shit's awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, not to crap on Nolan or anything, but like, after watching so many of the realistic Batman stuff, to go back to a time when Penguin had trick umbrellas and was using birds for his crimes and stuff, and Catwoman was actually called Catwoman, and they had a cat motif and a reason for the cat motif and the whip and everything. I'm just like, this is how it feels like. It feels right.
See, that's the thing that you notice more as an adult too, is that, like, Burton really was, to Uslan's credit, he really was the perfect choice for this time because he could pull off this heightened comic book atmosphere, but combine it with that macabre sense, with a sense of humor as well, which really was kind of what a Batman movie needed at the time. Two Batman movies, like definitely not realistic, but still dark enough for adults to enjoy.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it was like, I don't know, it's like so perfect, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he was the right director for this, and obviously, our lives would be very different if he hadn't done that, because without these movies, we wouldn't have had this exposure to the character. In a way, we wouldn't have the animated series.
We wouldn't have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, probably.
No, of course not.
Like, this movie really was a huge turning point for comic book movies.
Yeah, I think Jake Gyllenhaal recently said, not this one, but the '89 Batman is still among one of his favorites of all time in terms of comic book movies.
I'm sure it's many people's.
Yeah. So I'm sure
that was in an interview for Far From Home or something.
Yeah. Still ashamed that he wasn't Batman, but whatever.
Yeah. Ben and I were on board for that, by the way, listeners.
If you hadn't listened to previous episodes, but this is the Catwoman to beat. Not Halle Berry. I mean, Anne Hathaway did what she could, but like after watching Dark Knight Rises, I'm just like, nah, Pfeiffer's still the queen of this, just because like she has such an interesting characterization. The cat suit makes sense because she's like mocking Shrek in a way in terms of her revenge plan against him. Also, it's like people might find the whole thing weird, but the original version of the Catwoman origin was that she was an air stewardess who fell out of a plane and had some sort of amnesia sort of thing from it. And just suddenly decided to go crazy. So I'm like, okay, if that was the comic book origin at the time, at least with what the writers grew up with, I don't really mind this version. The more recent ones, recent to this movie at least, had variations on the theme of her being wronged by the men in her life, either an ex-husband or her boss. If you guys had read Year One, she has a pimp named Stan the pimp.
Oh my God.
In a separate storyline was
so
like
she was a prostitute then?
Yeah, as you see it in Year One.
Yeah.
And they expanded on that in some of the Catwoman comics, and she dons the Catwoman outfit inspired by Batman to fight him off. Just like the Catwoman in this one is sort of inspired by seeing Batman after he saves her from in that hostage situation.
Yeah.
So it's, even though yes, it's not technically comic book canon to have her shoved out of a window and revived by cats, it is, the theme is still there, just like with Penguin, the themes of him being an outcast and wanting to be part of society, yet also wanting to get revenge on society at the same time. All those themes are still intact. They're just done through a different lens. They're just done in a different way. It's not bastardization of it. The only thing that could make her more Catwoman is the fact that, I don't know if you noticed this, Catwoman doesn't steal anything in this movie.
That is true. That is true.
To be fair, it wouldn't really make sense with this version, but like she is known as to be a thief, because Catwoman, cat thief, and all
burglar.
that. So it is kind of odd to see that, just like as we'll cover in Batman Forever, Riddler doesn't actually use any riddles for his crimes.
Right. Yeah.
So it is kind of weird to see, but also like you kind of have to think about it. The store sequence kind of feels like it's a heist, but it's not really.
Yeah.
She's just there to blow it up.
That. Yeah.
Yeah, but she doesn't actually take anything with her. So that's sort of one of the sort of minor things that I noticed about this Catwoman that not a lot of people talk about. I'm going to go into rankings unless you can think of anything else.
I want to talk about Catwoman a little more.
Sure.
Pfeiffer, like you said, really is the MVP of this movie. Keaton's there; he's doing a great job. He's definitely being Batman again. But I guess it's just that it's like how like I said before, Heath Ledger sort of outshines Bale in Dark Knight. This is sort of what happens here in her own way. And this is the first time probably ever up to this point when this movie came out where you saw like this kind of like dark villainous type of character.
Mm-hmm.
She's like whipping fools and fucking stabbing Batman in the gut and shit. Like this is like and she, with her getup and the whip too. This is also something you don't notice when you're a kid, but there's like a little bit of BDSM thing going on there.
Mm-hmm.
She's very much into like pain is pleasure, pleasure is pain kind of thing. It seems like that's part of something under the surface. But anyway, Pfeiffer's performance, you can't say enough. Like this shit was fucking incredible. It holds up. It's a kind of heightened performance where it would be classified as overacting in another movie, but this is a comic book movie directed by Tim Burton, and it fits perfectly in this type of tone of film. And
honestly, the most normal person in this movie feels like Batman.
Yes,
he's
that's true.
The only person who seems like he's kind of an average dude compared to everyone else. Everyone else is more over the top.
They really heightened how crazy she is in this. And you've said off the air, but just for the listener real quick, like she really was never quite that insane in the comics before this, right?
Not really. I mean, there was a more villainous side to her than what people are used to today, where she's more of a sort of love interest that's kind of in the gray area that you kind of saw in like The Dark Knight Rises and stuff that's in the current Rebirth run where, they got engaged and shit like that. But like for a long time, she was a straight out villainous. And everything, just like in the 60s show. And
so she wasn't gray at all at the time. She was just straight up.
Yeah, I mean, the gray areas would be like some thug would want to kill Batman, and she'd be like, "No," and they're like, "Well, why?" And he's like, "Well, you don't want the cops like to put a murder rap on us," even though like it was her like trying to justify it. And meanwhile, Batman would like do something where he'd be like, like maybe I'm not going to run so fast after her. Maybe I should let her go, type of thing. So like, it was that type of back and forth, but it was never one where you never really got the idea that she had like severe psychological issues outside of the amnesia stuff that I just told you about, where she fell out of a plane and suddenly wanted to become a super criminal or something.
In this movie, it's like she's kind of like a deranged serial killer type. Maybe not quite that dark, but it's it seems inspired by that kind of thing.
A little bit. I mean, she's more focused. She's focused to get revenge on Shrek, and she is sort of a representation of the woman who's been victimized by men and mistreated and seen as like only good for making their coffee and being in the kitchen and shit like that. And that's why she criticizes that one woman. When she saves the woman, she's not like, oh, be safe, like some other hero. She's just like, you're pathetic trying to wait for some Batman to save you, type of thing. And it sort of speaks to, it still feels like it's relevant to today in a ways. It's a very 90s way of doing it, but it still feels like it's the ideas behind the characters still feel like they're relevant.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing more 90s is the fucking CD that they pull out.
DJ Bruce in the Batcave.
And they pull it out like it's like the coolest tech of all time, too, when they pull out the CD. It's just a normal ass fucking CDR looking thing. But anyway, yeah.
Don't forget the bat symbol that's on the player.
The bat symbol on the player. I mean, we all wanted that shit.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to rankings.
All right, rankings. So we're going to do this at the end of every Batman movie that we review until we get through at least all the live action Warner Brothers ones. I don't know if we'll get around to watching the 1940s serials or the Adam West stuff, but we'll at least watch.
I would not be against it at all.
We'll see. But
by the way,
now,
we haven't talked about this at all. This is me doing this right during the air, but I would let's do Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes.
And I have the Blu-ray right here.
I have the script for it too.
Oh, nice. Well, that's going to happen, listeners.
Okay, yeah, we'll do Mask of Phantasm, certainly. And we could do probably some of the other animated movies too, the ones that we liked. Not
Under
every
the Red
one
Hood.
Yeah,
fucking incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're gonna rank at least the live action ones for now.
Yeah, so we're doing just the first 4 in the 90s right now.
I mean, I think we'll rank it as we go along. So
now we're just ranking 2 movies.
We'll just rank 2 movies.
Okay.
And as we get further along, we'll be ranking the movies as well as maybe the Batmans. as well in terms of the
Okay.
performances. So,
Okay. Gotcha.
as well as like any of the characters. So like, who do you prefer more, Pfeiffer or Hathaway? I think we know the answer to that. But still, like that'd be an example of like,
Yeah.
us ranking the different versions now that they're more fresh in our minds. So, Batman 89 versus Batman Returns. Which do you feel is the better movie?
I think overall it's still 89.
Mm.
And the reason for that is just the Joker's just cool as fuck, man. This one is not too far behind it, and it's cool to see Burton go full Burton. But there's something about like the ending set pieces too, the action scenes, like the bat plane taking the balloons and going in the sky, and then you got the big ass gun that should have been a tank, and and then you got the fucking fight on the bell tower and shit. Something about that, it really is cathartic. You really kind of get what you want out of that. Whereas this one, they're fighting in a sewer, and it doesn't feel. It's still good, but it's just, I don't know. It's not quite as big as the first one. I like the big spectacle of the ending, the parade and everything of the first movie quite a lot. And like Joker's performance, hard to beat, man. I know Catwoman's fucking awesome in this movie, but Nicholson's Joker, like, I'm glad you're dead, and scenes like that, I fucking eat that shit up, dude. So it's still 89.
Honestly, I'm liking this one.
You like this one more?
I like this one more. Okay. I had a better time watching this one, rewatching this one with you than I did with 89. I don't know how much I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know how much of that is just because I saw 89 so much that, as I said in that episode, like it's almost has no effect on me anymore when I rewatch it. Yeah. So that could be part of it, but also I just feel like in terms of an adaptation of the character and cultural impact, 89 all the way. Like it feels and breathes like Batman, whereas this one feels like more of a Burton movie with a lot of experimental stuff in it.
Burton movie with Batman in it.
Yeah. And people have said that a lot, and I agree with it. However, like the Catwoman arc, the performance there, the depth of character to her, and the motivations to her, and Penguin, and the interplay with that is just, there's something rich to that I feel like is not there with the 89 movie. It would have been there if they adapted more of the script that we talked about, the Ham version, but it does feel like there's more of a story to this one to me. Whereas the other one, the other one, it felt more like the original story got stripped further and further by studio interference. This one felt more. It feels more of Burton's vision, what he actually wants to do with it, and even though it might not feel as close of an adaptation of Batman, it does feel like more of a movie to me than the other. Like, and it could also just because I know a lot of the behind the scenes shit, so like it's difficult for me to rewatch Batman 89. Now, knowing all the stuff that could have been, and all the stuff that's like, okay, that's studio interference right there, that shouldn't have happened, blah 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 blah. Like this improvised scene. Whereas this one, I'm usually not really thinking about that. I can just sit back and relax and watch Batman fight Catwoman and Penguin, even though I've seen this like a million times. So for me, I'm actually going to rank Batman Returns above Batman 89. Might be controversial to some, but for now, that's where
I think that it's less controversial than you might expect.
Yeah,
a lot of people really love this movie, and I think a Gotham set at Christmas time too. There's something so nice about that. It really works. Like Gotham in summer, man, it just wouldn't work as well. You need that fucking cold atmosphere of Gotham at night. You know, the snow and everything. It's fucking works so well. You know, I'm sure they could work a summer Gotham in some way or another, but like, I think that was really a genius move on their part to include that as part of the background.
Also, the idea of like the lonely dark night, almost like finding love and losing love during Christmas time. It's just kind of, there's something beautiful.
There's a loneliness to Christmas that a lot of people have because there's so much emphasis on family.
Right.
And then when people that don't have the family, they feel more alone. So that factor, I think it really works. It really works.
It works for this one, especially with that ending. I feel like the ending is just, it's beautiful. As I said, like I related to it as a kid, and for a while, this was my favorite Christmas movie to watch. Not because it's better than Die Hard or Wonderful Life or any of the other traditional ones, but it was one that like I got the feeling of it. So like it's partially why maybe in my mind it's still my preference between this and 89, even though, you know, the kid in me loves both. Batman fan of me loves both. But if I were to pick which one to rewatch, it would have to be this one.
As like an ending thing, it seems like we're ending here soon in a minute.
Sure.
But so there's that masquerade,
Yes.
maxquerade, as he says. It seems like that might have been a bigger deal in earlier scripts, and maybe we can hint at this for later. But the whole thing about like I'm tired of wearing a mask, it just seems like that's such a thematic thing, and that might have been a bigger deal, especially with Bruce's arc. Because once again, you have like Bruce's arc more or less to the sidelines.
I mean, the criticism is valid, even though Keaton is one of the strongest Batman we've had. He's also the most passive in terms of being a protagonist. He doesn't like all the action is driven by Penguin, Catwoman, and Shrek.
Right.
Really. He doesn't really do much. But the idea of he's tired of masks there's sort of an undercurrent of that's not quite explored. And I guess we didn't really talk about Batman. That just shows how much he's in this movie. We talked about all
so much in the monsters.
Yeah. But it's like ever since Vicky left him, it sort of feels like he's gotten more and more lost in terms of who Batman is. When we first meet him, he's not at some party and he sees the bat signal. He's not at Wayne Enterprises. He is in the study, and he's even gotten to the point where he's got the bat signals on the roof and everything. It's right. He is waiting to be called. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And then there's other little moments that was expanded on in the script, but when he tells Selena like, "Oh, I mistook me for someone else."
Yeah.
Or where he like flat out just tells Max Shrek, "Yeah, you're working with a crime boss, and I'm culpable." Like it's like he stopped caring about Bruce Wayne being a facade anymore. Okay. He's getting a little careless with the secret identity sort of thing. And that's explored a little bit more in the original draft of this, but it's an interesting arc that doesn't quite go anywhere, because then it gets sort of interrupted by the Catwoman arc by the end, where it's about like trying to stop her from killing Shrek, which seems a little contradictory considering what he did to Joker.
Are they hinting at stuff like, was something lost in an earlier draft where he says he's tired of wearing a mask? So is he getting tired of being Batman or anything like that? Or
I think it's just he's unhappy with his life and feels like there's an undercurrent. We'll explore this in the upcoming episode, but there's a feeling that he's questioning why he's still Batman if the city of Gotham doesn't deserve it.
Wow, that's some fucking awesome shit. That's a good arc.
It's not
he
in
thinks
the movie.
The city of Gotham does not deserve.
Well, look
him.
at it. They worship Penguin and everything. They immediately, when he gets framed, they immediately think that he's the bad guy and stuff. He's like, why the fuck am I doing this sort of type of stuff? So that's explored a lot more in the original Daniel Waters draft. It's an interesting thing, but again, it doesn't really there's not really a resolution to it. As you see in the movie, like he then is now all about trying to save Catwoman from herself, which is also a weird thing because it's like, is he trying to save her from killing Shrek? Because we know he killed Joker in the first one. He might not. It didn't seem. It's ambiguous whether or not he deliberately wanted to kill him, but he did. I mean, it's ambiguous if we actually did intend to kill him with the whole wrapping the bola around Joker's legs around the gargoyle. But he did flat out say, "I'm going to kill you." Yeah. So is he trying to save Catwoman because the writers forgot about that shit, or does he know the loneliness that comes with doing that afterwards and is trying to save her from that? Or maybe I'm just looking too deep. Some
great shit that was kind of lost in the shuffle. It sounds like
it feels like it. I have a feeling since Burton had a bad time making 89, I don't think he thought as in depth with this. However, there is kind of a slight arc because you get to Batman Forever, and if you feel like these are all in the same continuity as we did as we were growing up, Val Kilmer says, you'll make the kill and the revenge, but then you'll find another face and another and another, and you'll find that you wake up one morning and realize that revenge has been your whole life and has made you empty inside type of thing. And maybe that realization in hindsight came because that's sort of what Bruce goes through in here, is him realizing like revenge has become his whole life. This is all he is. He's Batman now. And you find somebody who he, has only met a few times, but you can tell there's a fascination there. Someone who realizes he cares about, someone who's like a reflection of him. Every villain in this movie is kind of a reflection of Batman. If you think about it, you got the orphan Penguin, you got Shrek being the rich, powerful guy. You got Catwoman being the vengeful person in a suit.
That's true. That's cool. That's cool.
And so he sort of sees her as a reflection of him, and the fact that she refuses and still goes on the same path that he did almost tells him, like, it almost sort of makes him even less optimistic. You know, I imagine it would make him even
So
darker.
he's frustrated with being a thankless hero. That's kind of his arc.
Yeah, that's definitely in the Waters version. That's not really in the movie. We'll explore that more.
Isn't that crazy
episode.
how like you have a movie called Batman Returns and the lead character, title character's name, his arc is pushed to the side
for everyone else.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my God.
Everybody, that was the appeal. You know, the appeal. To be fair, a lot of the appeal to Batman is his rogues gallery. That's what made the 60s show great, was because of the villains that would come up every time, and people were excited about them because
the villains got to be shining.
Like it was always famous people playing the villains, and then when it came to this one, it was all about like, you know, who are the villains? The next one, who are the villains? And the movies were built around those. It wasn't really until Nolan came in with, you know, the Dark Knight movies, where at least in Begins, where he was like, well, this is a movie about Batman. The villains almost, you know, are not inconsequential, but like they're not the main thing of this. You know, they won't steal the show, at least in the first one. That went out the window once Heath came into Dark Knight. But at least with Batman Begins, that was the first time where you can look at this and be like, okay, this is actually about Batman.
Right.
At least, I mean, to be fair, from what I remember of Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, there's actually more of an arc of Batman in those movies than the Burton ones.
I gotta say, when I was a kid, we'll get into this when we do Batman Forever, but just as a hint or whatever preview
of the next
didn't
month.
really like hate it when I was a kid. I actually enjoyed Forever.
I loved it too. Yeah.
When I left Batman and Robin, though, I was really like, okay,
all right, well, we'll get
we're definitely lost some quality here. Even when I walked out when I was like 12 or something, 13.
Yeah.
So
but I mean, there is, between the two, there's not a lot of a story arc to Batman in the final films, but there definitely was one in the original versions of this. Because remember, 89's Batman was about a guy who realizes he's turning sane when he falls in love with Vicky Vale. Again, not in the final movie. And this one's was supposed to be more about a guy who feels like more of a thankless hero and isn't sure whether the city deserves it. And there's other variations, different themes in the other previous drafts, but that will have to be saved for the next episode.
All right, everybody, this has been yet another installment into our ongoing deep dive into the Batman movie universe. I guess you could call it that.
Yeah.
And just like the last go around with Batman 89, we're going to do, the next episode is going to be a deep dive into the scripts from basically the very first scripts up until the actual final movie, to see what we got, what was lost along the way, and things like that. Ben's told me some things off the air, and it's fucking incredible. So I actually cannot wait to go over that stuff.
These are arguably more interesting than discussing what actually happened in the movie.
Yeah,
I think.
Do you think they're more interesting than the Batman 89 changes? Be honest.
Yes,
they are. Okay.
They are more interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. There's the preview, guys. Yeah. All right, so this is Andrew, SuperHouse Podcast. Catch us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Search for SuperHouse Podcast. Also, most importantly, I guess, patreon.com/SuperHouse Podcast. That's patreon.com/SuperHouse Podcast. And I am Thunderwolf Drew on Twitter and Instagram. And your plugs, Ben?
I am Ben Juan Ryder on Instagram.
And that's it.
I don't fuck with Twitter. and that's it.
We have contacted Steve Englehart and Sam Hamm. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, we'll see.
That would be fucking awesome.
Anyway, yeah, that's it. Signing off.
Ben signing off.